Hello, folks who are arriving, folks who are watching this later. Hello. I'm so happy that you're here. I am Irisanya Moon, and again, I'm one of the Moon Books authors that are doing these presentations, Q&As, and I'm super excited to be here today, talking about my next book, which is coming out, later this month. I never know the date exactly. Allegedly, it's on my birthday, though. So if you're feeling like you want to send a present, buy a book. That would be great. I just thought that I would start off this little presentation doing a little bit of talking. And then after that, I was going to open it up to questions. And if I don't get to all of your questions, totally fine. You can always message me. I keep things confidential, and I love talking with folks about things that are on their mind. And so let's go ahead and begin. So I want to start off by reading actually the back of this book, which is Practically Pagan, an alternative guide to health and well-being, because I think the back is a bit of a spell. You are precious. Your body is precious. Your mind is precious. Your heart is precious. With your actions, with your connection to yourself, you create a foundation that can weather all that comes before you. Perhaps you have been told otherwise. Perhaps you have believed otherwise, that somehow, some way, you are less than worthy of love and care. Perhaps you know you are worthy of love and care and beauty, but need to be reminded or given permission. I want to tell you that your health, your well-being is valuable. And the actions you take to care for your beautiful self are a gift and a sacred prayer of intention. So again, I am Irisanya Moon. My pronouns are she and her. I currently live on the land of the Wapo, the Southern Pomo, the coastal Miwok, and the Great and Rancheria peoples, which is now known as Santa Rosa, California, United States. I am a reclaiming witch, initiate, international teacher, and also an author. I have been with reclaiming since 2008, but I've been a practicing witch since many years, 20-ish years. And one of the things I think is really important for you to know about me, besides all the things that I do, is that I am a type A personality. I am a person who likes to achieve and do and meet challenges and take on way more than I should, which has often created a lot of conversations within myself about burnout and about how I care for myself. Along the way in my writing and in my magic, I have had a lot of folks tell me, you really need to refill your cup. And I ignored them because, of course, I know better. And there were many moments where I have been burnt out with my magic, burnt out with my writing, and to that point where you get a little resentful. And that's not the way I wanted to live anymore. And it's not to say that I don't go there and visit sometimes, but what's important to me and what has become more important to my magic and to my body, my heart, is that I need to take care of myself. And I know that I live in a society and a culture that often says that is selfish, that is something that is superficial, that it is something that is a waste of time. But I want to challenge that. I want to challenge that, especially in the times that we're in. I wrote this book a year ago before we even had an inkling of where we would be today. And it is still relevant and possibly a little bit more relevant. I mean, I found myself rereading some parts going, oh, well, I should be doing that. So what I want to say is that a lot of my teaching and a lot of my writing now has moved into this place of talking about resilience and capacity building. And I actually started that sort of work when my mom was killed in a car accident. And I realized that the tools that I was using to care for myself were not enough. I needed more. situation had changed, and my body, my heart, my mind all needed more. And I struggled for a really long time. And, grief is its own thing. Suddenness is its own thing. And, losing a parent is its own thing. But through all of that, I have learned that there are ways to become more resilient and bounce back a little bit quicker than I would have had I not had that experience. And we'll actually talk about that in a second when I sort of go over what's in the book. But so more and more, I'm thinking about ways that we can help each other, that we can help ourselves, really stay grounded and present so that we can figure out what we need. What do we need to feel good? What do we need to feel balanced? What do we need to nourish ourselves? And especially this is important because these times, I don't know if you've found this out, but things that used to work before for me aren't working or haven't worked. The 15-minute walk that used to be the thing that would really satisfy me and make me feel good in my body, I need to be out for way longer these days. We have all these different layers of stress, anxiety, fear, isolation. And even folks who have, isolation is sometimes, oh, this has been really nice. Over the course of 6 months, it starts to become difficult. And folks who are already isolated to begin with are having even more challenges, I would imagine, and I have also heard. So this is where I sort of call it the self-care book, but it's not really that because I actually have a chapter about the myth of self-care, so we'll get to that. But it's more about how can I show up for myself? How can I be present for myself in the places that I am? Because if this year has taught me or anyone else anything, we can't be sure what's going to happen next. So I am hopeful that this book will help offer tools, offer exercises, or even just offer some soothing words that maybe you just need to hear. And I just invite you to give yourself the permission to truly show up for yourself and to show up for your heart where it is in these moments. So what I'd love to do is I would love to sort of go through what is in the book, because I know that when you find the book in other places, it only shows you part of the outline. So I'm going to give you an insider's look. And we'll sort of go through that. I'll probably veer off into different tangents because that's me. And at the end, I want to sort of read one of the meditations that are in the book so that you can come back to this and, maybe listen to it again if that feels good for you. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions and things like that. And I hope this is helpful, and I hope it's inspiring for you. And I hope if today's a hard day, that maybe this can help it be a little bit better. So this book is, yes, I have tabs in it because I need to remember where things are in it too. So obviously I start off with an introduction, and what's really important, a lot of people skip over introductions, myself included. This introduction really starts off with release your ideas about perfection. Self-care seems to be this thing that's put on a pedestal, and it's only a good thing if you do it right. Please let go of whatever right thing you've been told. Self-care is different for everybody. What works for me might not work for you, doesn't work for someone else, or might. So I really want to invite, before we do anything else, to release this idea that you need to be perfect at it. You don't. There will be days where you go down into the depths of that bag of crisps or chocolate and you just hide from the world. I have been on many Netflix adventures because sometimes it's just too much, and that's okay. And sometimes that's exactly what self-care is. So perfection, set that aside. Thank you so much for your information, but this is not what we're going to do anymore. It just puts more stress on us. We have enough stress. So when I start this all off, one of the things that's important to me is to look at the stories that we're sort of telling ourselves. These stories that are often passed down from our parents, guardians, friends, cousins, all of that. how can we look at the stories that we tell ourselves about what we need, what's the right thing to do, how to show up, am I being selfish or not, all of those stories. And I invite us to think about them, maybe even write them down, and find ways to transform them or sometimes release them entirely. A lot of these stories do have a lot of value to us, and they have really helped us be safe and secure. But if you're in a place where they're not working for you anymore, I really want to offer the invitation that you can also let them go. So we'll work on that right from the start. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. I am a big fan of writing because I'm a writer, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that will work for you. Some folks find it really great to do art, movement, song, making, arrangements out in nature, hugging a tree, whatever works for you. Really, that is the thing, what works for you. So right from there, we move into sort of, how do we create a direction for the work that we're going to do together? And so it sort of makes it sound as though you need to work through this book like page from page from page. You don't. You can actually go to whatever section calls to you in this moment. I trust your heart. I trust your intuition to tell you exactly where you need to be and exactly what you need in this moment. So in the beginning, I do like to have, I personally like to have an intention or a goal or a sort of direction that I'm going in. Harder to go on a trip when you don't have a compass or a map. But, maybe that's not where you're at right now. That's fine too. I also really want to encourage and inspire in you this idea that you can be creative in this process. I often talk about altars. I talk about music. I talk about things of beauty around you, things like that. So I'm also going to talk a lot about creativity and however that looks for you. And there is a lot of writing. So if you're into that, this book is also perfect. So one of the first sections is your body as the foundation. We get this beautiful body for this lifetime, as far as any of us know, or at least I know. And so how can we make our bodies strong and the foundation for whatever comes next? I don't know about you, but I've had rougher days when I don't sleep, when I don't have the food that works for me. So I talk in this section a lot about your body and sort of what your body needs in order to stay strong and to stay nourished. And I want to be very clear that when I say nourished, and I talk about like what you might want to eat or what you might want to, do with your diet, I am not saying anything about weight loss. I am not saying anything about you need to eat all kale. No, this is about really tapping into your body's knowledge and finding out what works for you. Because not everybody, I am not a kale fan for one. And that was always the advice that I saw. And I was like, oh, am I doing it wrong? No, I just had to find something else. So that is something, in case you're worried about that, don't be. So, but really food is, building blocks, fuel, all of the things that you need to really arrive and be present. I also go into talking about movement. And that can look a whole bunch of different ways. I am aware that my body moves in one way, your body moves or doesn't move in one way. So finding something that feels good for you, even if it's just a twitch of a shoulder or just a slight movement of a finger, all of that is great. But sometimes when we're in these moments, when we're not feeling like present and we're not feeling grounded, we're not feeling healthy, we kind of end up feeling stuck. And so we tend to stay still. And so I invite some sort of movement to remind yourself that you're still moving, breathing, living, that there's still action and vitality, even in the smallest movements. I also talk about water and hydration. I actually learned this about myself this year, that I get less defensive if I am more hydrated. Very interesting to learn about my body. So you might find the same thing, or you might find something else. But I talk about the basics. None of these things are all that surprising, right? Making sure you drink enough water, whatever that means to you. I'm not going to tell you how many glasses. Getting enough sleep, which is, can be tricky in these anxiety producing times. So definitely talking about that, ways to support that process and being a little bit more easeful and consistent. And also something that I think a lot of us, okay, let's just say it, me, I forget a lot. And it's the idea of play. Like, play is essential for our bodies. We're not just these working sort of organisms. We're also this, we're still children in some ways. We still need to find joy and still cultivate our curiosity and not just be working and achieving and getting that to-do list done. And, we also need to make space for play and hopefully joy that comes from that. So that's something that I value and work really hard to do. Getting kittens has been very helpful for that. And then in the next section, we've worked on body, and now we're going to work on the mind. And, this is an ongoing, we're going to be working on the mind our whole lives, or as long as we are aware of what's going on. So I sort of go through the whole thing about like why we're stuck there so often. I think that this is an often shared experience, that we have this idea that if we just think long enough, or we think enough about something, or we have enough pros and cons, or we make a list, or we worry enough, that we'll somehow have control over what's happening. And even saying that, it doesn't necessarily inspire a lot of joy or a lot of comfort or even a lot of groundedness. And so one of the things I really talk about is this idea of, if you're a person or a human that sort of feels like that's something that's up for you, I sort of talk about how to get out of that overthinking and that rumination sort of style of living in your mind. Because one of the things that I've learned is that, we sort of think that our thoughts are us. And this is kind of an abstract concept, so I'm just going to put it out there, do with it what you will. But thoughts can sort of keep us mired in non-action because we're just thinking. And what you need to remember, we often identify with our thoughts. So if I think this bad thing, that means that I'm a bad person. But something that's really worked for me is to remember that if I'm thinking a thought, I'm the thinker, I'm not the thought. So I'm not that thought. Again, abstract, but something to consider, that you can actually release those thoughts because they're not really you. They're just thoughts. You have a brain, you're going to have thoughts. It happens. Like, I even talk about meditation, and because it's something that's been really valuable for me, but meditation is not just like the absence of thought. It's not. And that was really when it clicked for me. Meditation is more about teaching yourself that you don't have to hold on to thoughts. You can, notice that you have a thought and say, that's interesting, and then just let it go. It's not about the absence of it. It's the active practice of recognizing you don't have to be attached to them. You can just let them go. And the more you do it, the less you get reactive, the less you sort of jump into old stories and old emotions and triggering and arguments that you did not mean to get into. So yeah, meditation, big tool for me. But I also want to say, in all of this mind stuff, that there are very real chemical imbalances. The environment that we're in right now is really stressful, and it's really a lot. And a lot of us don't have a lot of coping tools. And those of us, including me, with anxiety, with depression, with other mental challenges, might be struggling a lot. And I want to really impress upon you that if you have the ability, the resources, to reach out to your physician, counselor, therapist, find one of those and sort of talk with them about that. Because I'm a person who is not against medication. So sometimes drastic times call for drastic measures, and it can also be helpful. But there's one thing I want to say about this book overall in general. I trust what your needs are. I am not ever going to, hopefully, make it sound as though there is a right way or there's a wrong way, or that you have to be all natural or you have to be all chemical. No, whatever works for you. it's going to work perfectly for you, and you're going to really learn to trust yourself too when you stand up for yourself. So of course, because, which I go into talking about activating your spiritual practice. And even if you're not a witch, that's fine. You don't have to be. You can be spiritually oriented. You could be, curious, practically pagan. You could be any of those different things. But there's something about having something bigger than yourself that I think can be really important to your health and well-being. And again, especially in these times, I'm going to say that a lot, I think. So I talk in this section about a daily practice, sort of some way of coming home to yourself or coming home to something that's super important to you. I also say it's daily practice, again, not daily perfection. This might be something that you do every single day because it's something that's just for you. And this can be something as simple as something you already do and just naming it as a daily practice. Getting in the shower and just allowing yourself to think about how you feel or wash away anything that doesn't feel good to you in that day. That could be a daily practice. Really being aware of how you pour your coffee or your tea. That can be a daily practice. But it's some way of creating sort of a safe shore in rocky waters. So something that's repetitive, that's ritualized, can be something that is helpful when the waves get really big, because they will, and they do. I also invite a daily practice to be short and sweet. It doesn't have to be hours. Something that's really easy, something that you can do anywhere. I know that a lot of us are at home these days, so a little bit easier, but coming back to yourself is really important. Checking in with yourself is really important. I also talk about different ways of sort of listening to spirit, if that's something that feels good for you, figuring out what divine might look like for you. Divine is a tree, maybe. Divine is the stars, the moon. It can be a whole bunch of different things. So if spirit is a place where you're kind of feeling like, oh, I could use some resources for that, this section is the one to look at. And so in the next couple sections, I sort of break down some things that frustrate me about this whole idea of health and well-being and self-care and all the magazines that sort of have turned it into this marketplace as opposed to really what it's meant to do, which is to support you. I don't know about you, but sometimes I end up feeling like I need to spend a lot of money to properly care for myself, which is not always possible and not always. It hasn't always been satisfying. Sometimes I have spent some money and I'm sort of like left with, I don't really feel nourished by that. So in the next couple sections, I talk about the myth of balance. I don't believe that there's a perfect balance. I actually feel like whenever folks are like, well, just get everything in balance. Well, what does that mean? Because my balance in a pandemic is different from my balance pre-pandemic and possibly afterwards when this is over. Balance is actually, for me, should be more of a conversation about recalibrating and going, okay, well, what works for me now? Because some things are going to be more important in some moments than in other moments. Like my relationship might be more important at this time, so things are going to balance in that direction. My teaching might be more important this moment, so things might have to calibrate in that direction. So I just want to, break open this again and again. I really want to break open this sort of idea that there's one way. I think that when we're sort of told that or sold that or, reminded of that by other folks who think that, I think it does a disservice to us. I think that it can create a lot of shame that you're not doing something right. And the concern for me in that is that shame has never been a good motivator for change. It might be for a moment, but not for long-term change. Again, what do you need? And this might be one of the first times you've asked yourself that, like, what do I need? Absent of what everybody says, absent of what everybody thinks, what that magazine, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. What do I need? What is balance for me? So I hope that this part helps you with that. And then the next section is about the truth about self-care. self-care is actually supposed to be a practice of nourishing, not necessarily putting on, the latest face mask and painting your toes and getting in the tub. That said, those things are wonderful and beautiful, and yes, I do them. But I would say that those are not always the things that I need to be nourished, which is what self-care is really about. It's about refilling that cup. And so you have to really think about what nourishes me. What's the thing that I've done that when I'm done with that, I feel better. I feel more present. I feel more grounded. For me, it's often a really long walk in the woods, or sometimes it is a bath. Sometimes it's sleeping a little bit longer. Sometimes it's going to get my favorite coffee. But what do you need to be nourished? But that really starts with a conversation about what do you need personally, and figuring that out is vital for this whole process of coming back to health and well-being, whatever that means for you. So when I talk about self-care and the truth about it, I go through this whole thing. And so I really break down, like, how are some ways we can figure out what we need? And so one of the things that I talk about in there is sort of, what's the ideal day for you? If you had complete control over your day, what would it look like? When would you get up? What would you eat? Who would you be with? What would you be doing? And even if this is not something you can actually implement at this point, it actually allows you to start to envision that as a possibility. And even if you aren't able to do any of it, maybe look at it again and say, is there one thing I can do on that? Maybe I can shift this one thing in my day so that I'm showing up for myself. And I'm starting to create that ideal sense of me and my presence in the world. So baby steps, right? Don't need to do these big, long launches. We can do little things and actually feel a lot of the benefits very quickly. And one of the things I think has been the most interesting for me in my life and in my sort of unfolding of my own self-care, because I have been the worst at it, really realizing how to live your own life, how to not live a life that's based on the ideas of other folks or the values of other folks. Really learning that this life is your life and you are responsible for it. So how can you show up for it as best you can? That is, that will be the best compass for what you do next. What is right for me, and just ignore all the other folks as much as you can. It gets easier. I will tell you, it gets easier over time. And then after that, we're going to move into a section that I'm really always been excited about, is this idea about cultivating resilience. So I talk about resilience, I define it, I sort of say, some folks are sort of upset with this idea that, we need to cultivate resilience. But really, because we shouldn't live in a world where that's possible or needed. We live in a world with humans. We live in a world with viruses, and we live in a world that we cannot control. So resilience is an important skill set. It is vital for us to continuously know how to come back to ourselves when things push us off to the side, push us into this or that or the other thing. So I talk about that, but I talk about resilience knowing full well from my own experience and also from what I've heard from other folks that often, actually, I'm going to tell a story first. So I cannot remember if it is Glennon Doyle or Brene Brown that told this story. Cannot remember, forgot to look it up before this. They were giving a talk and somebody in the audience, had a question, and they're a parent. And they said, how do I protect my child from the horrors of this world? And either Brene or Glennon said something to the effect of, well, what do you want your child to be like? And the parent said, well, I want them to be resilient. And the speaker said, well, how do you become resilient? And the parent said, oh, by going through hard things. We become resilient because we are going to face hard things. Because every time we encounter something that is uncomfortable, destructive, traumatic, annoying, every time we go through that, we learn that we can face something like that again, that we will make it through. I often say that, you know, at this moment in my life, I have made it through 100% of my worst days. It's a pretty good record, and it pretty much speaks to the fact that I'm probably going to get through the next one. I have a good track record. So in this section about resilience, I do talk about the idea of trauma. I am not a therapist. I am not even close to being one, but I have done a lot of self-research and a lot of therapy. So I do talk about trauma. And I want to be very clear that trauma is not, you know, a lot of folks think, oh, I don't have any trauma in my life. I haven't been in war. I haven't, you know, things haven't blown up around me. I haven't lost my home. Yes, I mean, there's this thing where we say like that there's big T trauma and little t trauma. Trauma is trauma. If something has impacted you in a way that it now impacts all of your current interactions too, that's trauma. It is this, you know, the sudden death of a parent. It is being in a car accident. It is losing a relationship. It is losing a job. Like all of these things can be really traumatic. And the more resilient we are, the more we can navigate those. But if you've had a lot of those in a row, you're probably feeling like, you know, trauma creates a situation in which we don't feel safe because we think that thing is going to happen again. So in this section, I talk about the different responses that sometimes come out of having a traumatic incident in your life. Now, with that said, it also sort of sounds like, you know, that also will make you more resilient. Absolutely. I have every faith that it can. It might take time. You know, getting that resilience is often hard won. So I do talk about that. I talk about like sort of the impact and how to start to create a sense of safety within yourself, a sense that in this present moment, I'm okay. I'm not in that situation anymore. I can show up and trust that I will know what to do if something happens. And this is often called resourcing and sort of figuring out what resources you need, external, internal, things like that. And there's also this lovely practice that is, it's not called spiritual, but I really feel like it is. This idea of creating inner allies. And, you know, they sort of say installing them into you. But basically it's about thinking about, like say for instance, like I have an inner ally that is, you know, Wonder Woman. And so when I'm feeling really not strong or not confident, I call on that inner ally, and it goes through the whole exercise of how to do this. But I can call on that inner strength and sort of refill myself so that I can get through what I need to get through. And then that reminds me that I have these resources and that I have done it and I can do it again. And like Wonder Woman, Aphrodite, you know, it can be anybody, anything. It could be some spiritual leader. It could be a parent. It could be a best friend. But I love that practice. And so that's one of the things I sort of leave that resilience space with. I also bring in a couple of things that I've actually learned in my magical practice and sort of how to run energy through your body, because health and well-being is all connected to energy. So some tools to maintain your energy is the next section. And running energy through your body, it can be with, you know, running a pentacle, so running a star shape through your body. And I talk through a couple ways you can do that. And also, I think one of the most, I don't know, I think a lot of folks say that this is such a basic tool, but yeah, it's basic, but that's because it works. And it is the thing that you come back to, and that's grounding. Grounding, grounding, grounding. When I don't have energy, ground. When I have too much energy, ground. When I am scared, ground. This idea that we can ground into the energy of the earth, we can ground into the energy of the stars, We can ground into our own internal energy, or that safe space that we have, that we know we can trust. So always grounding. I think that's the name of the section, actually. It says grounding, always. So when we can also learn how to ground, not just when we're in this, mystical state or when we're meditating, we can also learn how to ground when we're walking, when we're in a car, in a plane. Grounding can happen in any moment. And you might find a way that works for you that is completely different from anything I suggest. And that is great. Finding those resources for yourself. And finally, the last section of the book is about support systems. As somebody who really bought into the idea of rugged individualism, and still sometimes does, I really am not great at asking for help. I really have to be in a bad way to ask, because I think that I should be able to do everything. We are humans. We are not machines. We are not able to handle everything on our own all the time. And if there's a little part of you that says, well, maybe I should be able to, I would invite you to think about who told you that. Who told you that? And we don't have to do this work, this life alone. And even if you're not with people right now, or you don't have a lot of people, there are still ways to have support. Just like I talked about in that last section, the idea of sort of having these internal allies, that's one way. But also about having folks in your life that love you and that love you and that will be there for you as much as they can. I really invite folks to name those people, because I know, let me say for myself, when I feel alone, when I feel scared, it feels like I am the only person in the world and no one has ever loved me and no one has ever cared. And that's just anxiety talking, and that's maybe me not taking care of myself talking. I actually went and made a list, because I can go back to that list and be reminded, oh, these folks are here for me. I mean, also, you should be there for you. You should also be someone who loves you. But sometimes that's a longer conversation. All of this support system creation does begin with you knowing what you need. And so if you're a person like me that sometimes can't discern what you need until you absolutely need it, I invite you every day to ask yourself at one point during the day, what do I need? What do I need right now? And even if it's something that seems really simple, like I need a glass of water, I need a snack, I need to go outside, I need to get away from this computer, I need to not have as many Zoom meetings, all of those things. Just ask yourself, what do I need? And try to give yourself that at some point during the day. Because that's really going to cultivate a sense of trust in yourself, that you're also there to support yourself. And I would also say, too, that support is not only what you call in or what you invite in and all of that. It's also about what you don't invite in. When, in the US, at the time of this presentation, we have just had the 2020 election. And I think that the best way to support myself, the best way that I did support myself after that, was to not go on social media as much, to get away from energies that just weren't working for me in that moment. I didn't want to read all the things or all of the assessments and all that stuff, because that just activated my nervous system more. And I just really wanted a moment where I could restore myself before going into that again. So thinking about, and really thinking about, how does this person or this group or this activity, how do they make me feel? Do they make me feel supported or not? So if they're not making me feel supported, maybe that's something I need to step away from for a minute until I can figure out what does, or until I can figure out how to ask for the thing that does support me, or ask them to change, or, that's a little bit trickier, asking people to change. But what can I do to support myself? And I go through some more strategies about self-support, always more information. So that is the summary of the book. What I will say too is that I have a whole bunch of resources at the end of the book because I love a good resource. I love book recommendations. There's some websites. I tried to put it out into like different categories so folks could easily find what they wanted. And also at the end of the book, I did some worksheets and diagrams based on things I talked about previously in the book. So if you want to see how I would, make that diagram or that chart, fantastic. You can also obviously feel free to do what works for you. These are just, ways that organize my brain as it is. And, things that I have back there are sort of like tracking your day, how things make me feel, how I moved, how that made me feel, how I cared for myself, what I believe and what I value, what my priorities are, the care and the feeding. I love this one. This is like the care and feeding of Irisanya, for example. And this is a space where I can write down all the things that Irisanya needs when she's having a moment. And these are things that are, here's something that makes your body feel better. Here's something that makes your mind feel better and your heart. And, here's something that will make you laugh. And here's something that will make you cry if you need to cry. So having like that template is super helpful. And you can give it to people who love you and say, here, this is the care and feeding of me. And in case I need it and I can't remember to ask for it. And there's also space to create your own sort of pentacles and running energy through your body in case that's something that's interesting to you. So those are all the things in the book. What I would love to do, and this is super short, is I actually would love to sort of walk everybody through just a little guided meditation sort of thing. In the book, I say, you can record this and listen to your own voice and, do this when you will. And I don't know about anybody else, but I hate listening to my own voice. And so I'm going to do it here. So then you don't have to do it. And you can just come back to this and you can listen to it. And like I said, it's super short and it is hopefully something that might be a kind little gift to yourself for today or for the week or however many times you listen to it. So wherever you are in this moment, I just invite you to get comfortable. Take a breath. Allow the air to fill your lungs each time you breathe in, and feel the release of tension each time you exhale. Whenever you find a thought coming into your mind, release it with the breath. You don't need to judge the fact that you think. It's natural and it's fine. But maybe for this moment, you can release the need to think. You can let the thoughts fade away and move outward with your breath. Even if they come back, you can easily release them again. Allow your inner self to become still and grounded. It can help to picture a root dropping down from the center of your body, or from your tailbone, or from another place that makes sense to you. Let the root drop down deep enough to connect with the earth, to the place of stillness and nourishment. As the root deepens into the ground, you can feel yourself becoming stronger and more settled. You have an ally in the earth. You have a support system that you can tap into at any time. All you need to do is drop your roots deeper and connect. Allow yourself to stay in the deeply connected space where only what is happening in this moment matters. And right now, you are calm, you are safe, and you are supported. You are calm, you are safe, and you are supported. You are calm, you are safe, and you are supported. Once you feel this fill your bones and your muscles, you can begin to become aware of the room around you again. You might open up your ears to hear what sounds are emerging. You might smell the air to see what you can smell. You might move your body and touch your fingers. Slowly open your eyes to come back to the place you are. I hope that was a little touch of nourishment for your day if you haven't had any already. And so this is the moment where I'm going to open it up to any questions from folks who are here. And again, if you are watching this later, you can always feel free to reach out to me. Irisanya.com has a little contact thing. I'm happy to have chats. I'm also all over social media and not too hard to find Irisanya. And that's great too. Again, I will take any questions about all the things. I'm also really good at saying I won't answer something. Hello, Maria. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Barbara. Oh, I'm so glad to see little faces and names. This is great. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions about writing, self-care, stories of my failures of that. I'm an open book. Thank you, Xenia. Yeah, it's an ongoing, so funny to write something and then have it be so incredibly relevant 2 times. Ooh. Oh, thank you, Heather. Thank you for being here. And here's the book with all my horrible tabs to try to remind myself of things that are in it. Yes, there is my website. And so something I did want to say, actually, I'm so glad I remembered. I have notes in front of me, but I go off script all the time. So one of the things that if folks are interested, in 2021, I am going to offer a course that's sort of based on this book. Because while I have crossed every finger and toe that the pandemic will settle, heal, all of those things, I recognize self-care has probably come up as a thing that we're going to have to really cultivate for moving forward. So I'm going to come up with an online class so that folks can continue, we can all work together. We can all support each other in our health and well-being, because there's really not going to be a switch that we're all going to be okay again. It's probably going to take a minute. And so that's going to happen. And it's in the works. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again. Wow, what story that supports you right now? That's a good one, Ala. So in terms of, I actually do know the answer to this question. So I taught at Winter Witch Camp this year. And the story that we used for the camp, it's this, 4 or 5 day sort of magical excursion where we have classes in the morning and rituals at night. So I was on the teaching team, and we work with a story every time, mostly. And this year we worked with a story of Gulbig. So she is a Norse, of the Norse persuasion. And that story that we worked was the story of her entering Odin's hall and getting speared in the side, hurt in the side with a spear, and then burned in fires 3 times. But each time she burned, she was reborn. And she came out of it unscathed, but newly born and initiated. And what she did is she moved into becoming Hader, or Heider, depending on who you ask. And in that space, she became a vulva, she was a vulva, a seeress, sort of that went around to the different villages and, helped farmers figure out if they should plant their crops at some point or things like that. But she transformed from this, she went through the fires of initiation. This is the part of the story that I feel is super important. She goes through the fires of initiation and then is reborn into a life of service. So one of the things we did at camp is that, we broke the spears of initiation and turned them into the wands of service. And so that story for me has supported me, is that part of the story, the actual line of the story, is that often, not seldom, but still she lives. And that is a part that is Gulvig moving through the fires. Like, you can't even imagine what all those folks probably saw. And we're, in the story, you think about all these guys looking around, and this woman gets through there and she just burns and then comes back out. So for me, that is a story that's serving me right now, is to know that I can walk through fires and not be burned. And often, not seldom, I will still live. And what's really important for me is that anybody who's watching this in this moment or in the future, you're still living right now, even through all of this. It might not be comfortable, but we are all still living. So that to me is huge. But Gulvig, yeah, thanks. And Gulvig is spelled Gullveig. That's a really good question. I think everybody should come up with a story that maybe they can live with. Like a phoenix, exactly. See, like the phoenix story is perfect too for right now. Any phoenix stories. I think those are great. There's also something about going into the underworld, which I don't know about anybody else, but I don't know if I want to work in the underworld stories for a hot minute after all of this. So I say that, but I'm lying. Of course I do. Of course. Yeah, I'm trying to think other things that I might want to share with folks. I have written other books. So through Moon Books. Thanks, Ala. I know, Ala. Good to see you. I've also written other books if folks are interested. I wrote another 2 Moon books, Pagan Portals, Reclaiming Witchcraft, in which I wrote about my tradition. And hilariously, we've changed a bunch of things in our tradition and are changing things right now. So some of it's out of date. And then I also wrote a book on Aphrodite. So I'm actually going to do a class on that too next year. So, and that's going to be called Love Spells for Tired Hearts. So yeah, so busy. I'm still a type A, but you can be type A and care for yourself, I promise. Not always perfectly, but you can. Anything else? I'm an open book. I'm just so grateful to be able to talk about all this. So grateful. Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. Is it Andrea or Andrea? I'm going to try both just to be safe. Thank you. Yeah. I hope you can come back to it. And I hope you find the book helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It is truly, truly very personally relevant. And so it feels really good that I can share it with folks. I mean, I've been sort of talking about this stuff for a while, and now I actually have it in book form. So that's great. Again, not a therapist, but I've tried these things out on myself. So. Again, if anybody wants to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. And the book comes out at the end of the month. So if you want to pick it up, that's great. And you can find me on all the social medias to connect and learn about stuff that I'm doing. So, oh yeah, feeling guilty about caring for yourself. I got to tell you, that is the thing that stops me again and again. I grew up Catholic, so that might have something to do with it. And yeah, it was always like, put everyone else first, put everyone else first. So yeah, let go of being perfect. Absolutely. Let go of the guilt. You are worth taking care of. Even if it's 5 minutes a day, you are worth it, because, it's the whole, the joke about put your air mask on first before you help other folks. But it's true. Like, if you're not taking care of yourself, I will just say this for myself. When I don't take care of myself, I am horrible with other people. And so you know, this is all rough for a lot of folks for so many different reasons. Take care of yourself. Really, really, I hope that you do. I hope that I do. Let's keep reminding each other that we should. And not in a be perfect about it. But yeah. I hope that this is a spell that goes across the world. I really do. Time to take care of ourselves and our hearts. Yeah. Thank you so much. I am so glad I could be here again, and I'm sure you will see me again. And please connect, because I would love to continue this conversation, because I could have talked for a very long time, but I did not. So thank you.